The theory of multiple intelligences was first proposed by Howard Gardner in 1983. It was to help understand what intelligence is and have a better concept of it. However, the first question is, what exactly is intelligence? When we normally think of intelligence, we think of great minds like Albert Einstein, which are analytical and are measured by mathematics and language arts. But what exactly does the brain do? How does it operate? How does it work? Arguably, there is something more to the mind, something more than this defined by the intelligence traditionally done by psychometrics, which is measured by the IQ tests. It's exactly what Gardner set out to do, was to show that we're actually more than just two parts, to challenge the IQ tests. And he came up with 9 multiple intelligences, each one slightly different than the other, to explain human differences. The one we're going to concentrate on now is what's called interpersonal. To understand the interpersonal, it's probably best to understand those that lack the skill of being interpersonal. The main reason people lack this skill is that when they look upon society, it looks as if it's one big mass mess, that there are a lot of people with different emotions, different skills, different goals in life that don't really match up with theirs. And in this chaotic mess, it looks like we're only able to match up with specific individuals, that each person is made for each other, and that there's many others that, just don't fit with us because we don't have the same working parts and the same goals. And to the most part, those other individuals that don't fit within our understanding and grasp, they're about as unpredictable as the weather. The interpersonal sees nature of human beings as a symphony of how we all work together, whether our cultures are completely different, and when we look upon things that we aren't really familiar with, the interpersonal can actually connect. And although that there might seem to be these great differences, they can sympathize and understand, because when they first look at all these parts that are human, our human selves, they see many different parts, and while most people just look at these random parts as thousands of parts, each one of these, the interpersonal person realizes that together makes a whole, and makes one big machine, if you will, for society. And so instead of looking at these little tiny parts, they see that each one, though different, actually works together within harmony to create a greater good for our society. For what the interpersonal person realizes is that when they look upon the human body, they realize that about 99% of that person is actually all the same as the other person, that there are some very minor differences between the two of us, that there's only a small percentage, that we all want the same exact entire things. When we are hungry, we want food, and we want good, tasty food. Now, culturally, it might be slightly different, and it might look or be cooked completely different from one another, but in the end, we all want the same need of food. There's also this fundamental human need to appreciate nature, and what the interpersonal understands is that we are connected to one another through our similarities. The interpersonal might not understand the science behind this intricacies, and they might not understand the mathematics behind absolutely everything. But what they do understand, and what they do attest to, is that the human body and the human mind are very similar to one another. Once our similarities are understood, then they can actually start understanding our differences and the minor things that make us different, the things that we cling to as our individuality, that we are special through our individuality, but brings together a whole in society. And what they realize is that some of us have been floating in life maybe a little longer than others, with a little bit more faded with experience. But the interpersonal can put all these together, and with a little bit of green thumb of personal relations, great things can be attained, crossing all sorts of barriers. When we look throughout history, we can actually see those with the interpersonal traits, such as Benjamin Franklin, who helped get the French involved into the American Revolution almost single-handedly. And the French loved him so much that sets of plates with his face on them were highly sought after. Another example is Martin Luther King Jr., the great orator for the Civil Rights Movement. There's also Winston Churchill, who, through his speeches, kept the British hope alive during World War II. On the flip side, we have characters like Fidel Castro, whose interpersonal skills allowed him to lead a rebellion and then turn into a dictator. Hitler also had great interpersonal skills. He was able to convince the mass of Germany into crazy, insane ideas. So how do we teach the interpersonal student? How do we ensure that they become a Winston Churchill or Martin Luther King Jr. rather than a Adolf Hitler or Castro? Well, one of the biggest dilemmas for the interpersonal student is the 21st century technology with the internet. Blogging, Facebooking, tweeting, all these different things, they tell a lot about an individual, but they don't have a whole lot of personal interaction and connection because it makes them feel isolated. And although they might feel like they're in a sea and an ocean full of people, the connection isn't there and that they're isolated. And they might be sitting right next to somebody but yet not really know someone. So this is one of the most difficult and frustrating things for that interpersonal student, is actually sitting in a classroom all by themselves, not being able to do anything but just work. And what we need to realize as teachers is that these students hold a great key, something that is great within them. And what they are great at is actually connecting each individual person and applying it so that they can all work together. So they are sensitive to others' moods and feelings, their temperaments, their motivations. And because of this, they're actually able to empathize with others quite a bit. This makes them good leaders, but also good followers at the same time. So whether they become salesmen or politicians, social workers or teachers, you can be guaranteed that later on these interpersonal individuals will be bringing people together.